Hello, I'm going to talk about the moral sort of discussion I think that could be had about Doctor Sleep. So, Doctor Sleep, of course, is the sequel to The Shining, book written by Stephen King, The Shining film directed by Kubrick. Of course, King writes the Doctor Sleep book. The Doctor Sleep film was directed by Mike Flanagan. I think maybe wrote by two, but I'm not too sure, so don't quote me on that. And yeah, so it's very interesting to, I think, start with The Shining. Well, not interesting, I think it makes sense to start with The Shining because The Shining was a very successful book and therefore got made into a film, which was a very different film from the source material, from the book. And it told almost a different story, which is fine because if you've watched The Shining, and read the book, personally, I think it's possible to enjoy both. I have done both that. Like I've read The Shining and I've watched the film, and I enjoy both for being separate and different. Of course, there's some overlap and there's some similarity because, come on, The Shining is based on The Shining book. Like that's obviously going to happen. But there's enough difference there that I'd argue that you can see them as different pieces of work. So, when it comes to making Doctor Sleep, it's already tough because it's known that Stephen King really doesn't like a lot of The Shining and a lot of the things that Kubrick did. So, that's already a problem. And the book ties into just The Shining book. It doesn't tie into The Shining film, which makes sense and is understandable for King to have done. But then when it comes to making the film, you've already got The Shining film. So what do you do? And what they did was, in my opinion, wrong. And this is the thing that I think morally was you can have a discussion about and a debate about. Because they decided that they were going to try and marry both. And they decide that not only do they want to build off Doctor Sleep, but they want to build off, or not Doctor Sleep, The Shining book, they want to build off The Shining film, which is an issue because, again, both are so different, it just doesn't really work, and you are going to end up changing things about one or the other, which is exactly my issue. Because I think the Doctor Sleep film should have just built off the book. Because at the end of the day, the book was written not bearing in mind Kubrick's film. So you had to almost, or you'd have to almost surely try and do that and make it its own separate thing to the actual Shining film. But what instead they did do was they seemed to just, of course, merge it, be like, let's take some from the book and some from the film, which honestly, not only does it not work, but I just think is very unfair to Kubrick and Kubrick's vision. Because I know, of course, that The Shining is King's baby, but I would say that surely Kubrick should have, or should have been able to have some say over, of course, The Shining film. And he's passed away, so sadly he can't. So it feels very cheeky for them now to sit there and make a film that changes things about The Shining film and tries to retcon certain things, which is very clearly things that Stephen King just didn't fucking like. Like, I don't think that is, to be honest, I don't think that's acceptable. I don't think that's on. I think it's a very confusing film to watch because when you watch the film, you're watching a film that doesn't like The Shining film and does at the same time. Because Flanagan literally repeats shots from The Shining or has very similar shots, and there's a lot of symmetry with shots from The Shining. But then there's a lot of details that change things from the film. And to be honest, yeah, there's changes to the book as well, and both books, but I would say that the changes to, maybe not the changes to Kubrick's film were greater, but again, the changes to the book don't massively matter because King was like, or King is still able to have like any input or say, and like King's still alive. I just think if you argue that, yeah, okay, King has done what Kubrick did to him, I don't think that's fair, because I think you can build off source material and kind of make it your own. But also, other than that, I just think, like, Kubrick wasn't trying to hurt King, and it feels like, it's not that King's trying to hurt Kubrick, but it feels like King is definitely trying to change things about Kubrick's work he didn't like. I don't think, personally, that is fair. I think that is a bit ridiculous, and I think it's very disrespectful to a man and their creative work to change it once they've passed. And to be honest, it fucks me off, because I think it's just a money grab thing. It's everyone loves The Shining film. Let's link it into The Shining film, because if we link it into the Doctor Sleep book and The Shining book, it probably wouldn't do as well, which is true, but then it didn't do well anyway. I think maybe even by trying to tie it into The Shining was the issue, because I think that The Shining film wraps itself up very well, and I don't think you need a continuation. I think you just would almost believe that, despite, I mean, this is going to go into spoilers quick, but I mean, it's spoilers for The Shining. If you haven't seen it, I just feel sorry for you. Danny and Jack, see, I merged the names, not Danny and Jack, I can't remember the mum's name now, but the mum and Jack, not even the mum and Jack, the mum and Danny just sort of have to live the rest of their lives and get over the trauma left by the hotel and Jack. I think that is a very interesting way to look at it. But then no, instead, we get this film with, and I'm going to go into spoilers for Doctor Sleep, we get such a fucking uninteresting film, to be honest. The Shining turns into a superpower. The hotel doesn't feel scary, particularly, by that point, because it's like, they can kind of seem to almost do anything with The Shining, and they are so overpowered that, like, nothing in that film is really scary. There's, like, one or two decent scare scenes, but that's it. Like, it's just a weird plot, and the whole, like, weird vampire thing, I personally do think that Kubrick would not have had any interest in. To be honest, I think that it's not really shoddy, but I just think it's a weird place for the plot to go. It's very, I don't know, it's very interesting and weird to me that even that was where King was willing to go. Where the book explores so much about, like, abuse and that, and then this next book is about, like, fucking these weird undead, like, vampire-y things. It's just confusing. Very confusing. And yeah, I do think it was partially for money, and I do think it luckily backfired. Because I do think that most people didn't want to see The Shining continued on because they felt that it was pointless. So yeah, that was sort of it. I don't really know what to say now. Bye-bye.